Okay, cool. So welcome to our ACT Bootcamp. We are going to be going over a brief overview presentation of the SAT or the ACT and what it is. We will then be doing a brief practice test, and then we will go over the answers together. So it should only be about 2 hours. It's generally 3 depending on how long our answer responses are and how long that goes. So welcome in, and we will get started. So my name is Tia Oldham. I will be doing the presentation for you today. I am from the Northern Arizona College Resource Center. I've worked there for about 3 years, and we are a great organization if you are looking for help with anything college and career related, from scholarships to standardized tests to college applications to figuring out what college you even want to go to in the first place. We do it all. So if you have any questions about any of that stuff, feel free to shoot us an email after the presentation and set up an appointment with us so we can work on what is specific in your needs. But now we're going to go ahead and jump into our presentation. So the ACT. Ooh, hold on one second. There we go. The ACT, what is it? The ACT is a standardized test used for admission to colleges and universities in the US. So why should you take it? It's really important for college admissions. This is changing slightly with COVID just because a lot of schools are starting to veer away from it for college admissions. However, it is still necessary for incoming merit-based freshman scholarships in a lot of these colleges. And that will take up a huge portion of the financial aid that you will be getting in your college career. And also some schools still are requiring it for college admissions. So I highly recommend taking it if you are interested in going to any school or university. It's also great for career planning, private scholarships as well, and placement in higher ed courses. What will you be tested on? You will be tested on English, math, reading, and science with an optional writing portion, and we'll get into that in a bit. So the subject breakdown. The English section is typically 75 questions in 45 minutes. We can break it into 3 key categories for the skills you are being tested on. That is production of writing, so topic development, organization, unity, and cohesion. Knowledge of language, this will take about 13 to 19% of the test, and this covers word choice, effective language use, style and tone, and lastly, conventions of standard English. And this will cover grammar, usage, mechanics, and sentence structure, and this takes up the largest portion of 51 to 56% of the test. I like to think of the English test as you're like a newspaper editor and you want to make sure the article that you are approving is organized, it makes sense, it's fluid, it's engaging, and it's short, sweet, and to the point. So that's a big helpful key for the English test. A lot of it is going to be finding the shortest grammatically correct answer. Were there any questions on the English portion? Awesome, cool. All right, moving on. So here's a brief example of what one of these questions might look like. Down the street from the college I attend, the Save You laundromat is always open and someone is always there. And if you want to message your answer to this in the chat, Yes, awesome. The correct answer is C. So moving on to mathematics. So this will be about 60 questions in 60 minutes. This has a lot more skill breakdown. So preparing for higher math is going to be 57 to 60% of the test. However, it can be divided into 5 key subcategories. And this includes the math that you are most recently learning. So this will look like functions, which is 12 to 15%, which is knowledge of function definition, notation, representation, and application. Statistics and probability will take up again around 8 to 12%. And it will cover distributions, applying and analyzing data collection methods, and understanding models. Geometry will cover 12 to 15%, and it will cover surface area and volume, and solving for missing values. Number and quantity is about 7 to 10%. It is real and complex number systems and algebra. And lastly, we have algebra, which is going to be 12 to 15%, and it is solving basic equations, graphing, model and linear equations, polynomials, radical and exponential relationships. And then our other 2 categories are integrating essential skills, which is 40 to 43%. And this covers concepts learned in 8th grade, such as rates, percentage, area, volume, average and median, and expressing numbers. And then lastly, modeling. So modeling is going to take up about 3 or less questions, and it will cover producing, interpreting, understanding, and evaluating. And this will generally cover questions that are about trigonometry, circles, SOHCAHTOA, things like that. So if you're not super well versed in that, don't worry, because modeling takes up less than 3 questions on the ACT, and it takes approximately 5 missed questions on the ACT to average 1 missed point. So it's not even a full point that you'll miss if you miss every single modeling question. Were there any questions on math? Awesome. And then going over our example again, a rectangular lot that measures 150 feet by 200 feet is completely fenced. What is the approximate length in feet of the fence? And I'll give you a couple of minutes to message your answer in the chat. So our correct answer is D. Moving on. So our next section that we're going to talk about is reading. This is about 40 questions in 35 minutes. It can be broken into 3 key categories, which are key ideas and details, which is going to be the largest portion, 55 to 60%. And it covers determining central ideas and themes and summarizing information. Craft and structure will be 25 to 30%, which is determining words and phrase meanings, analyzing word choice and structure, interpret author decisions, and lastly, we have integration of knowledge and ideas, and that is going to be differentiating between fact and opinion, using evidence to make connections, and analyzing arguments. So this one is going to be a little bit more analytical than the English section. It's going to be most like your English literature classes, because it's going to be very analysis focused and content focused. The main key that you want to take away from the reading section is you really want to focus in on the main idea and author's purpose of each passage. because that will help you answer a lot of the reading questions. And I also recommend annotation and doing passage maps because that will also be very beneficial. Were there any questions on the ACT reading section? Awesome, okay. And then our example question for reading is early efforts to plumb Atlantic's depths provided outrageously inaccurate. One naval officer paid out 8 miles of rope from a drifting ship and concluded the sea had no bottom. As it is used above, the phrase paid out most nearly means what? Awesome. A is our correct answer. Moving on. So next we're going to talk about science. This is about 40 questions in 35 minutes, so similar length to reading. And like reading, it can be broken into 3 key categories. Interpretation of data is going to be 45 to 55%, and it will be manipulating and analyzing data, tables, graphs, and diagrams. Scientific investigation is going to be 20 to 30%. And this is all about understanding experimental tools, procedures, and design, as well as comparing and extending and modifying experiments or predicting the results of additional trials. And lastly, we have evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results, which will be 25 to 35%, which is all about judging the validity of experiments and forming conclusions and predictions. So the science, a lot of people get worried that it's going to be very math heavy or they have to come in with all of this prior knowledge. I like to think of it as kind of a combination of reading and science. So it looks the most similar to the reading passage, just with extra graphs. So you won't have to have like a huge understanding of scientific phenomenon to do well on this test. There isn't a lot of key vocabulary you really need to know. I would say, if anything, I would say understanding how scientific variables work, understanding the scientific method, and understanding how to read like different exponential and linear graphs and charts. And once you're able to do all of those 3 things, that's the majority of scientific information you'll need to do well on this science test. Most of it is being able to read charts correctly. And if it is on something, say like photosynthesis, the passage that it gives you will provide you every single piece of information you need to understand and get the passage questions correct. Were there any questions for the science section? Awesome, okay. So this is what an example of the science section will look like. So based on the results from the experiment, which of the following graphs best shows the relationship between the temperature and the distance of the ring from the HCl swab? Awesome. So the answer for this one is going to be D. And lastly, moving on to our writing section. So the writing is going to look like one prompt in 40 minutes. You'll have 40 minutes to write a complete essay. It will generally be on a complex issue, and it will present 3 different perspectives that you can either choose from or create your own perspective. It will complement the English and reading section, so it's very main idea and then support based. You should really analyze the relationship between your perspective and one or two of the other perspectives, because oftentimes it will want you to compare and contrast the different perspectives on the issues, because it is generally an argumentative essay that you will be writing. And you will also want the school that you are looking into will determine whether you should take it or not, because often schools will have preferences on whether they want you to take the writing section or not. So an example of what this prompt will look like is write a unified, coherent essay about the increasing presence of intelligent machines. In your essay, be sure to clearly state your own perspective on the issue and analyze the relationship between your perspective and at least one other perspective. Develop your support ideas within reasoning and examples. Organize your ideas clearly and logically, and communicate your ideas effectively in standard written English. Your perspective may be in full agreement with any of those given, in partial agreement, or completely different. So what you typically want to do, the most important thing for the writing section is timing breakdown. So typically you want to give yourself 1 to 3 minutes to understand and analyze the prompt, as well as decide what perspective you want, whether you want to create your own or what perspectives to pull from, and then give yourself about 5 to 8 minutes to brainstorm ideas. So think of different supports that will match up different perspectives and organize it that way. Create a brief outline for yourself. And then you only want to give yourself about 10 to 15 minutes to actually write this essay. And then with the remaining time, you want to have extra time to go back and edit it. So brainstorming is really, really crucial for the writing portion, just because you will be asked to provide support for your perspective based on your previous knowledge of the world, whether it be like literary or pop culture references, historical references, scientific references, whatever it is. And you won't have to cite your sources, obviously, but you will have to provide some sort of worldview support for each of your points in your paragraphs. Were there any questions on writing? Awesome, moving on. So scoring. So the scores range goes from 1 to 36. The essay range is graded a little bit differently. You're going to be graded from 2 to 12. And the average for the overall ACT score is going to be a 17 to a 23. So the ACT counts the number of questions on each test that you answered correctly. So you won't get any penalties for incorrect answers. You just won't get those points. The ACT will convert your raw score into scale scores. Scale scores have the same meaning for all the different forms of the ACT, no matter which date a test was taken. So it's a little bit different from the SAT because they revamped their scoring, whereas the ACT has remained the same. The 4 test scores are averaged out. Anything 0.5 and above will round up to come up with your composite score. And then benchmark scores show the scores needed for students to be successful in a credit-bearing college course. So for instance, students who score in this area will have a 50% chance of obtaining a B or higher and a 75% chance of obtaining a C or higher. And these benchmarks aren't typically super, super high. They're typically ranging from 18 to 23, which is on the lower spectrum of scores for the ACT. So scholarship scores, as you can see, these are just some Arizona colleges, but this is typically most schools, particularly in-state schools, if you're going somewhere else, or schools that accept the WUI scholarship, will have gradients that look like this for incoming freshmen. And it will kind of be a combination of your test scores as well as your GPA that will determine the amount of financial aid that you're able to receive in a freshman merit-based scholarship when coming into a school. So Northern Arizona University, for instance, you've got like a 4.0 to a 3.5, and you get at least a 19, which again is a lower spectrum score. And you right there are awarded about $7,000. ASU, they don't have it super public or published, but you can go to this link and it will and input your grades, your GPA, and your test scores, and it will give you a calculation based on what you input. So you can play around with that and see what scholarships you might be eligible for. And then the University of Arizona, it gives you, again, this long gradient of GPA and ACT score. So you get like 3.75 to 399, and you only score a 24 or 25. That's still $6,000 right there. So it's all very dependent on the school that you are going to. Were there any questions on college-based scholarships? Awesome, cool. All right, moving on. So if you're also interested in going to honors college, a lot of them will have required benchmark scores that you'll have to meet to be eligible to join the honors college as well. So if that's something you're interested in, I would look into your school's requirements. Some local in-state Arizona colleges, NAU Honors College requires a 27, U of A requires a 30, and ASU requires a 29. Any questions on that? Cool, moving on. So ACT college and career readiness benchmarks. The ACT test for college and career readiness, your score report will also include info on which jobs might be best suited for you and the likelihood of workplace success. So that's another cool thing that the ACT will provide. So the test style. The ACT, unlike the SAT, is going to be all multiple choice. The difficulty will remain the same throughout the test. ACT questions tend to be very, very straightforward. So again, with English and with reading, you really want to focus on main idea and how all the sentences connect to the main idea. With English, you really want to focus on grammar and making things short, sweet, and to the point, right? You want to focus on punctuation and grammar, and you want to make sure you answer all of the questions. So how to register. So here are some upcoming texting dates: October 24th, December 12th, February 6th, April 17th, June 12th, and July 17th. Make sure to register at least a month in advance to avoid late fees. These can get up to an additional $30. You also want to call in advance to see if your testing center is open. If you aren't taking it at your school, I would, again, if you're registering, call the nearest testing center location that you are trying to register for prior to registration, because some of them might be shut down or not operating because of COVID. So I would give them a call, and if a testing center near you is shut down, you can give us a call if you're having trouble finding another one to go to. I also recommend inputting at least 3 schools that you want to send your score reports to after your test is graded and completed prior to taking the test, because after you take the test, it will cost around $12. And if you register those schools prior to the test, you get at least 3 schools getting your score report for free. So that's just extra money that you don't want to be spending. So the cost of the test, there it is. The cost of the test, the ACT no writing is going to cost $52, and the ACT with writing is going to cost $68. And again, you can send your report to 4 schools for free before test day. After that, it's $13 per report. So definitely go and do that. So preparing for the exam. Take the test at least once to see how you will do. Pay attention to your scores, study, focus on your strengths and weaknesses, and you can get free virtual ACT test prep on act.org/academy. So your test day checklist. For test day, you're going to want your admissions ticket, at least 2 ID pencils, an approved calculator. Make sure that your calculator is approved prior to the test because they will take it away if it is not. A state-issued picture ID, a watch, a bottle of water, and a snack. Test day will generally have an 8 a.m. check-in, so some quick do's and don'ts. Only have your calculator, pencils, and snacks, nothing else. You will be taking your test preliminaries, so you'll be filling out all of your standard information. You will then be taking the test. If you have a special situation, make sure you contact the location and the proctor again 4 to 6 weeks before the test, so they have enough time to set something up for you. For instance, I've worked with students who have like learning disabilities before, and they are allotted either extra time or different versions of the test or a special testing room. So I highly recommend reaching out if you've got a special situation or a learning disability prior to about 4 to 6 weeks before your test date. Any questions on that? Awesome, moving on. So creating a study plan. You really want to plan out which test you will be taking, whether it's going to be the ACT or SAT, so you can really hone in your focus on one or the other. You really want to establish a score you're aiming for. This is super important when studying for the test because it will help direct your line of thinking. It will help direct your strategies and which strategies you're employing and using. And it will also giving yourself that set specific goal will help you be able to focus and stay motivated while studying for the test. How many times are you willing to take the test? Are you going to just take it once? Are you going to take it 3 times before accepting your final score? And lastly, when will you take it? If you're taking it 6 months from now, your study schedule will look very different, whereas if you're taking it in 4 weeks. So all of these are really important factors when creating a study plan. And if you want help creating a study plan, we've got a couple worksheets that we can send you and go over with you. So reach out to us after the presentation. Quiz time. So really quickly, we're going to go through some more section examples. So this is our ACT English example. Snowflakes form from tiny water droplets following a specific process of chemical bonding as they freeze, which results in a 6-sided figure. There are triangular snowflakes similarly confounded scientists for years because it apparently defied the basic laws of chemistry. And I'll just wait a couple minutes for you to message those in the chat.
Tia, you're muted.
She's gonna be.
Thanks. Yeah, so the correct answers are A and D. And moving on to our ACT math. So a rectangle with a perimeter of 30 centimeters is twice as long as it is wide. What is the area of the rectangle in square centimeters? All right, and the correct answer is B. Moving on to ACT reading. So this passage reads as, "You cannot see any of this, but Dr. Harry Chugani can come close. With positron emission tomography, PET, Chugani, a pediatric neurobiologist, watches the regions of a baby's brain turn on one after another, like city neighborhoods having their electricity restored after a blackout. He can measure activity in the primitive brainstem and sensory cortex from the moment the baby is born. He can observe the visual cortex burn with activity in the second and third months of life. He can see the frontal cortex light up at 6 to 8 months. He can see, in other words, that the brain of a baby is still forming long after the child has left the womb, not merely growing bigger, but forming the microscopic connections responsible for feeling, learning, and remembering." So answer these couple of questions in the chat, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so our answers are A and G. Here we go. Moving on to ACT science. So given the diagram showing identical levels of gas molecules in different containers, a reasonable inference could be made that there is a relationship between these different options, and then the relationship between the variables in this diagram is best described as what type of relationship? And I will give you a couple of answers to type those answers into the chat. All right, and our answers are B and C. So these variables would be inverse because here our temperature remains the same, but our pressure is reversed because as it gets bigger, the pressure gets smaller. Were there any questions on that? Awesome, moving on. So congrats on knowing your ACT, and remember you can always get more help from actacademy.org. Were there any more questions or comments? Awesome, cool. So in a second, I am just going to stop sharing my screen. And again, here's our contact information if you are interested in setting up or scheduling an appointment to go over creating a study schedule or any of the other services we provide. They are all free. We're not offering test prep classes right now like we normally do, but we are hoping to start those as soon as we can because we are creating some new curriculum for it. And give me just 1 second. Okay, there we go. So now I will be sending you a link to a quick practice test. And you will I will time you, so it will be a timed practice test. It will be shortened, so it'll only take about an hour. And I highly recommend pulling out a scratch piece of paper or opening a Google Doc that you can type all of your answers into while you are taking the test.